All right, let's get started on other forms of inheritance. So we've already kind of touched on this with some of the Punnett squares that we've done. Here we have Fuller. So this is basically not looking at just a straight up relationship of dominant and recessive, right? So here you see that purple with white, all plants had purple flowers, some had white. So this is pretty much Mendelian, right? I'm not gonna do the pair deck with you because it's too hard to do separately, but you can see that this would be white is recessive, is being masked by the purple, and as a result, all the F1 generation is purple, but if you cross the F1 generation, you will find out that 3 out of 4 will be purple and 1 out of 4 will be white, thus showing that the white one has been masked and is now showing up. However, as we know, that most traits are not just like one or the other. There are several forms, whether it's skin color, eye color, height, a whole bunch of things fall within a range. And so we have our simple dominance ones that we've done, which is Mendelian, but then we have incomplete dominance, codominance, multiple alleles, and polygenic inheritance, which will be the things that you will read about, but we'll lecture about first. And so whenever we have incomplete dominance, that means that there is an intermediate phenotype. The easiest one of this would be if you thought that there was black and white, and the intermediate color would be gray or versions of that. So if you had a true-bred red flower crossed with a true-bred white flower, what color will their offspring be in this situation? And in this situation, you would expect there to be a pink middle, right? And that would make sense because white and red would mix to pink. And this is incomplete dominance because one doesn't really overpower the other and they kind of give some intermediate mix. This is a vocabulary word. It should be in your vocabulary section. The next one is plants with pink flowers produce any flowers with red offspring. So here's the cross we talked about. We have our red flower crossed with our white flower. And we are using still the big R's and little r's for this. And as a result, all the offspring turn out to be pink. Now the question is, could plants with pink flowers be able to produce any red flowers? And that would be basically a cross of yes would be the answer. And the way that it would happen is that you have to remember that you are crossing big R with big R little r. And if you are crossing big R little r with big R little r, what you would end up happening is that 1/4 of those would be red, 1/4 of those would be white, and 2/4 or 1/2 of them would be the mix. And you can always do that cross. But I'm not able to show it right now, but you could do that and take the time to practice that out, and you've already done some practice like that. Another example of incomplete dominance is the roan color that exists, but it's not just that. There's horses that have several different colors that exist, and here roan is in cattle, sorry. So in horses you have chestnut, which is big D, and they're going to appear this dark brown. Then you have the mix, which is the middle phenotype, which is a palomino, which has one of the chestnut, which is big D, and one of the palomino, of the, cremello, which is basically nearly white. And as a result, you get this middle light-looking color horse, and then this one, which is carrying both of the little D's, which would mean that you are basically nearly white. How many genotypes are there? There is 3, right? Big D, little d, and little d. How many phenotypes are? There are 3. Big D, little d, little d, and you would have 3 phenotypes of that. So there are some differences that exist when doing this, but it's really important that you're able to kind of understand that, I would say that incomplete dominance probably is more intuitive for most people to just imagine that there are mixes between the between the phenotypes. Now we have codominance, and codominance is when you have no dilution of the two, but actually you get a equal pop-up of the two, and that's kind of like a polka dot situation. So here we have our pure red, we have our pure white, and whenever we do codominance, we like to use different letters, right? So here we have, because they're equal, there's no reason to have one upper and lower case, right? And here we have our pure red, our pure white, and then we mix them together and we get this roan cattle that has both white and both red without any dilution of the ones that are in there. Another example of codominance, once again, the polka dot. In this camellia, the white and red alleles are codominant, which means that they both pop up. There is no dilution. If it was incomplete dominant, we would have probably a very light pink, if you could imagine, because instead of having this splotches, they would blend together into an incomplete dominant situation. So if we had the allele for fill color of red and blue, and if it was codominant, what would it look like? And I want you to think about that. And the answer is that it would basically be polka dotted, right? It would be blue and red. There is no dilution. It would not be purple. And I think that's what a lot of people would think, but you have to remember, this is where people make the mistakes. The codominant versus the incomplete dominance. Codominance, they both pop up. Incomplete dominance is one pops up and the other one doesn't. Here we have multiple alleles. And this is probably the trickiest of the ones because it's, well, it makes sense. There's like an order of power that exists in them. This when you have a gene that has several alleles, right? Now you have one that is most dominant, next most dominant, next most dominant, and then the most recessive. So this has several different combinations that can exist, right? So in multiple alleles, we have rabbit fur color, and there's 4 different alleles. You have our dominant, which stands for our wild type, which is kind of the one that you would expect to normally see. So big C, anytime you have a big C, it's always going to appear wild type, which means it's going to always appear brown. So all the different combinations that can appear this are big C, CH, big C, CH, and big C, little c. Any combination of those, and as long as you have it, is going to appear you brown. But as you can see, while wild type is dominant to chinchilla, if you have 2 chinchillas, you'll appear chinchilla. However, if you have 1 chinchilla and 1 Himalaya, you will still appear chinchilla. If you have 1 chinchilla and 1 albina, you will still appear chinchilla. So in this case, while this is the most dominant, you just need one of these, this is the next most dominant. And the same process happens for Himalayan, which is this white fur with black paws, nose, and ears and tail. Here, as long as you have the Himalayan, it will overpower the albino. Although if you have the Himalayan, it gets overpowered by the chinchilla and it would be overpowered by the brown. And then, of course, the only way you get albino is if you are carrying both of the recessive albino genes. So the question is, and usually we go a little bit slower through this, but I'll review with you guys, is that I'd like you to predict the phenotypic offspring of a cross between a chinchilla and between a chinchilla-colored and Himalayan-colored rabbits. Both are homozygous, so that's going to be C, big H, C, CHCH, C, CHCH, and CHCH. So you'd have to create a Punnett square for this, and if you were to predict this, I really want you guys to really think about it. I'm going to take like just a little bit of time for you to like in your mind think about it, but realize what would have to happen. Since it is both homozygous and the chinchilla is dominant to the Himalayan, 100% of them would appear chinchillan. However, you have to remember all of them would be carrying the gene for Himalayan, so the next generation would lead to it. So what phenotypes can lead to chinchilla? There's several phenotypes that can lead to chinchilla. So just wanting to finish that up, you have to realize that chinchilla can be, what genotypes can lead to chinchilla? A chinchilla can be led to by big CCH, CCH, that would be 2 of them. It could also be a CCH, still chinchilla, CCHC, still chinchilla. Now, you could also have a brown type have a chinchilla if it was heterozygous brown type with chinchilla crossed with heterozygous brown type with chinchilla or Himalayan or albino, just as long as the cross has a chinchilla and one of the less dominant forms, such as Himalayan or albino. So it's really important to kind of consider that as you go through it. So here are 4 different alleles, C, CCH, C, H, and C, and the dominant of each allele decreases from left to right as you look at it. So here you have the different combinations, and the phenotype of a big C, CH, because it has that big C, should be brown. A CCHC should be chinchilla because it's dominant to these ones. CHC should be Himalayan because it's dominant to albino. So you have to look at the order of what is more dominant to be able to figure this out. So not only do you have to figure out the Punnett square, but you also have to figure out you have to know which one is dominant to which one so that you can get it correctly. So here we have our full color. These are all the combinations. As long as you have the big C, you're brown, you are going to look at this. If you're chinchilla, as long as it's chinchilla and one of the lesser ones, or lesser dominant ones, you're good. Same idea for Himalayan. As long as you're full Himalayan or albino, you're good. And the only way you get albino is if you have only little c's. Another example of multiple alleles is blood type, which we'll be looking at in a second. Now, the blood type, we have A, AB, A, B, and O. And the way that we get these blood types is that it's kind of a codominant situation along with the recessive situation. So A and B are codominant to each other. They would both pop up as long as you have A and B. There are two ways to have A. A with the recessive O, A with two A's. Now there's only one way to get AB, where you have one A and one B. With B, just like A, there are two ways to get B, two B's, or B plus the recessive O, which is really just the lack of this antigen, but there's only one way to have O blood type. So this is another example of a multiple allele situation, which depends on what you're producing. Polygenic inheritance is that we have multiple genes that are guiding our eye color. So as you guys can see, there's so many different eye colors. There's a whole bunch of different genes. Remember, that is sections of DNA that are coding for proteins that can, in different combinations, give us all these different eye colors. And you can see all these different eye colors literally, and just know that there are, I think, 6 or so different genes that in different combinations can give you these different phenotypes. Same idea with skin color. These are all 3 different, you can see there's a genotype for A, B, and C with different combinations leading to different productions of melanin, which is going to lead to different colors of skin. Now, we're doing this as a simple combination with these parents, which are heterozygous for each of them, which means that they could have a mix of them. However, you need to understand that there are way more than 3 genes involved in many of these, so it gets really complex. So yes, we start out with just a straight dominant recessive relationship, but you have to understand that just because that's how we start out, that's not really reality. There are polygenic inheritance, there's multiple alleles that can control it, and of course there's epigenetic and environmental situations that can change your phenotype. Remember, just because you're born with blonde hair doesn't mean that you're going to be blonde. You might decide to dye your hair red. You might lose your hair and have no hair whatsoever. Here are different combinations from parents where you can have babies that look or offspring that look very different from each other, but they came from the same parents because of the way the combinations of the genes showed up. If you had a black chicken crossed with a white chicken and produces black and white spotted offspring, what is this? Incomplete dominance or codominance? I want you to consider. As I said, I can put this together as a pair deck for you to go through, but think about it. Since you have one of each of them, that is codominance. Another one, if you have straight hair, wavy hair, and curly hair, if a person with straight hair marries someone with wavy hair, can they have a child with curly hair? Do the punnet, you cannot. And why? It's because the only gene that the straight hair person can produce in this situation is an H, which means it will always lead to at least wavy or straight hair. Environmental effect. So this is environmental effect. Temperature can change skin color. So we can see this in rabbits and in Siamese cats, and they can impact the color of the fur, they can impact flower color. So just realize that environmental impact can really change the way you look. And if you think about why you would want your extremities to be black, think about how temperature and extremities absorb heat. And you probably want those, that's probably where they have the reduced blood flow. So really consider these things as you go through it. As we said, we've kind of gone over epigenetics, which can be an environmental factor, which I think is really interesting. And that takes us to the end of this lecture.